Let's get right into it.
To truly wrap our heads around this source material, we're going to navigate through 6 key phases. We'll start with the origins of the protest, look at the hunger strike, the setup for the crackdown, and then those clashes on July 20th. After that, we'll dive into the alleged media blackout, and finally, how this evolved into a nationwide movement.
All right, Phase 1, Origins of the Protest. To understand how things boiled over, we have to look at the inciting incident that kicked off this whole movement back on June 20th.
So, what were they actually asking for? According to the creator, the students who started this sit-in were hyper-focused on one single issue. They weren't out there demanding massive, sweeping, systemic overhauls on day one. Their primary demand was actually pretty straightforward: the resignation of Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan over the massive NEET exam controversies. Basically, they felt like their futures were being toyed with, and they demanded accountability right at the very top.
The source material lays out this critical timeline, framing the first month as this period of slowly but surely escalating tension. So the sit-in kicks off on June 20th. Jump to day 9, June 28th, and activist Sonam Wangchuk joins the fray. Then, fast forward almost a month to July 17th, and we see this incredibly sudden removal of the Delhi police commissioner. And literally the very next morning, Wangchuk is detained. The creator really emphasizes these rapid-fire institutional moves as the immediate spark for the chaos that followed.
Which brings us to Section 2, the hunger strike begins. This focuses on Wangchuk's arrival and the massive shift in tone.
The creator draws this really sharp contrast between the beginning of the timeline and the end. It's basically night and day. For the first 20 days, the protests are described as 100% nonviolent. We're talking friendly interactions between protesters and the police. Sonam Wangchuk was on a completely peaceful hunger strike for 17 days. He actually lost 8 kilos, and he was drawing massive sympathy from across the country. But as the source points out, that peaceful dynamic took a very dark turn by the July 20th climax.
Remember that sudden removal of the police commissioner we just mentioned? Well, here is a detail the original breakdown really zeroes in on. On July 17th, Commissioner Satish Golcha was abruptly yanked from his post, and that's highly unusual considering he wasn't even scheduled to retire until April 2027. The creator's theory here? Golcha might have been replaced specifically because he was letting the peaceful protests continue. Because get this, his replacement was pulled directly from a role in the Intelligence Bureau, literally right before the crackdown began.
And that aggressive change in leadership leads us right into Section 3, setup for the crackdown. The source alleges that the night of July 19th was a highly calculated trap.
So the creator argues that the scene was deliberately manipulated the night before a huge planned protest march. First, authorities slap on Section 163 of the BNSS, legally banning any gatherings over 5 people. Then, 10-foot barricades aren't just set up, they are literally welded together. But here's where the creator says things get genuinely suspicious. Out of nowhere, a heavily damaged van and a truck full of bricks are parked inside highly restricted, police-blocked zones. And at the exact same time, all the metal detectors and security checks are inexplicably removed from Jantar Mantar on a night when security should have been at its tightest. The source frames this as a blatant attempt to plant evidence, discredit the students, and essentially invite chaos.
To top it all off, the original breakdown claims that internet access was purposefully killed across 150 different sites in central Delhi. The explicit goal here, according to the creator, was to create a blackout, to guarantee that no footage of the impending crackdown could leak out to the public.
That takes us right to the morning of the planned march. Section 4, Clashes on July 20th. This is where the physical confrontation boils over.
According to the source, the government made its first move right at 9 a.m. by actively trying to stop the crowds from even gathering. Boom! 5 major metro stations, all the main access routes to Jantar Mantar, abruptly shut down. But despite the transit closures, thousands of people still managed to arrive, leading to this massive, tense buildup of totally frustrated students. Once those crowds actually started their march toward Parliament, the source alleges that the police response was immediate and incredibly harsh. They claim police fired at least 25 tear gas shells at peaceful protesters near Parliament Street. The creator stresses that footage actually shows tear gas being thrown at people who were just standing around or sitting peacefully, describing the whole thing as a totally unprovoked escalation.
But this is where the allegations get seriously alarming. The creator points to footage showing what they describe as terrifying police conduct. We're talking officers with their faces covered by handkerchiefs, uniform nameplates completely missing, and government vehicle license plates hidden from view. Furthermore, the analysis claims that there were men in plain civilian clothes roaming around with the police, actively participating in beating the students, acting, as the creator puts it, like unaccountable thugs.
While all this violence is allegedly playing out on the streets, the source claims there was a whole other tactical maneuver happening behind the scenes. Section 5, Media Blackout and Tactics.
The creator calls this a deliberate negotiation distraction. So while the police are allegedly charging the crowds outside, the protest spokespersons are caught up in this massive bureaucratic runaround. First, they're offered a meeting with a district magistrate, then that gets escalated to a union secretary, and then they are made to wait 2 whole hours just to get a super brief 10-minute meeting with Health Minister JP Nadda. The creator's main takeaway: this was a calculated move designed to isolate the protest leaders, making absolutely sure they were out of sight and out of the way while the physical crackdown happened outside.
At the exact same time, the source asserts there was a coordinated effort to suppress any independent journalists trying to document the reality on the ground. The creator specifically names individuals targeted by this violence. YouTuber Shamira Singh, who was recording the beatings, Sarthak Goswami, who was reportedly slapped by an ununiformed man, and reporter Ramit Verma, who's repeatedly struck until he suffered a severe head injury. The source holds this up as clear-cut evidence of a targeted campaign to completely silence the truth while mainstream media was nowhere to be found.
Which leads us to our final segment. Section 6, a nationwide movement. Because the big question is, did these heavy-handed tactics actually work to crush the protests?
Well, according to the source material, they absolutely did not. In fact, it backfired. The creator claims that as news of this Delhi crackdown leaked out, it ignited a massive backlash. The protest almost immediately spread like wildfire to major cities and universities across the entire country. We're talking everywhere from Lucknow and Mumbai all the way down to Goa and across to Arunachal Pradesh.
And perhaps the most powerful moment of resolve highlighted by the creator is this. Despite the tear gas, despite the batons, and even after the complete dismantling of the stage where Sonam Wangchuk had been fasting for weeks, by that very same evening of July 20th, the protesters marched right back to Jantar Mantar and rebuilt their stage. The creator's ultimate point here is that physical force completely failed to break the ideological resolve of this movement. Which leaves us with this final, genuinely profound question raised by the source material. When a state tests the absolute limits of its citizens' tolerance, does suppression actually extinguish a movement, or does it just ignite a nationwide revolution? The breakdown we analyzed today clearly argues the latter, presenting a timeline of events that really challenges us to think about the balance of power, democracy, and accountability. Take a second to reflect on how this whole timeline was constructed and what it really means for the future of civic action. Thanks so much for learning with us today on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.